name is Ricardo Martinez. I am the new executive director for GLBTQ legal advocates and defenders. I started about 54 days ago, and it's been really a wonderful 54 days to do this work with folks, the caliber of the staff that we have, the legacy that we carry on is incredibly meaningful to me, and I just want to say that I'm grateful to be here in your presence, and excited to get to know each one of you individually. I didn't get to speak to all of you, but if we have time after this, it'd be great just to do an introduction. I use he, him pronouns, and I have the pleasure of welcoming and introducing the people to my left. P.S. Thank you, Quinn, for the lovely introduction and for coordinating and setting this entire event up. I appreciate you very much. So I'll start with Jennifer, and I'm going to read from this so I can do you justice, even though I know you. Jennifer Levi is Senior Director of Transgender and Queer Rights at GLAAD, and Shannon is Legal Director at the National Center for Lesbian Rights. Together and individually, Jennifer and Shannon have secured foundational legal victories for transgender people. They are currently challenging some of the most harmful anti-LGBTQ laws we've seen passed around the country in the past few years, laws that criminalize essential health care for trans adolescents. We are thrilled to be honoring Shannon and Jennifer tomorrow at the Spirit of Justice Award, and to have the opportunity to talk with them tonight, engage in conversation about the national landscape and transgender rights. Welcome, Jennifer and Shannon. So originally the format was going to be that I ask 8 questions and they give us their expertise, and then I ask more questions, and then we open it up towards the end to folks in the crowd to ask more questions. But I think we want to just have a conversation, and we're going to do things different because GLAAD does things differently. And so upon the recommendation of Jennifer, I'll start with the question, but it'll be a conversation. We'll pivot back and forth. So I'll start with question number 1. Awesome. So let's start with some background. The two of you have been working to secure legal rights for transgender people for a long time. What are some of the major advances you have seen over the time you have been doing this work?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And actually, just to flag, I don't know, Quinn, if you want to find the audio person. I'm not sure, Shannon.
Oh, is yours work? Yeah, y'all hear this?
We've got someone going to the AV closet.
Jennifer broke mine.
Yeah.
You catch it. I don't know.
Anyway, I'll just launch into it. I just want to say I really appreciate everybody coming out tonight, and my hope is to have kind of an informal conversation among this extraordinary group. I know many of you have done a lot of important work along the way as well, and we are at this, I think, this unbelievably challenging moment, and we've got something like 14 days now, or what? Okay, that's what I have to work with for years. You know, before this incredibly momentous election that's coming up, which I do think, however it goes, GLAAD and our partner organizations are just going to have more and more intensified work to ensure everybody's equality and freedom and dignity. So, yeah. So I said to Ricardo, we should have this be a round-robin conversation with what else will be. But I wanted to, I mean, we've seen unbelievable change over the years. It is such an honor to be honored alongside Shannon, who really has been such an important person in my life in doing transgender advocacy work. And just to give you a little bit of context, I think we met in 1996 in Texas, a little Texas history for you, at a conference called the International Conference on Transgender Law and Employment Policy, informally known as ICLEP. And I think it might have been Houston, although I'm not entirely sure. But I, at the time, I'd been a lawyer for not very long at all. I was doing work that I didn't like very much. and had a teeny little travel budget to do I didn't know what. And so I looked to see how I could get more deeply involved in transgender law and policy. And up pops this conference on transgender law and employment policy. And I thought, that's great, I'm gonna go to that conference, which was in Houston, Texas, in like the summer, I think it was like July of 1996. And it was at like a Quality Inn or Comfort Inn or something like that. And I went to this conference and I walked into a room of about 100 people, most of whom were either transgender women or people who identified at the time as cross-dressing men. And my eyes really kind of quickly went up to this very front right-hand corner of the room to 5 transgender men. And it was the most, well, transgender people for sure I'd ever seen in my lifetime, but more transgender men that I had ever met. And it was like I walked into what felt like my home. And I didn't even really know it at the time. And I met Shannon at the time, and I also met Stephen Whittle, who has been the architect, really, of transgender rights globally. And I met a couple of other, like a tiny handful of other transgender men who have done extraordinary work over the last now nearly 3 decades. But kind of to circle back to, your question, at the time, there was, Shannon, I asked you to follow up on this. I mean, there was like a tiny bit of law relating to transgender protections. A lot of it was in the context of family law. And actually, it was fairly positive, mostly, or not uniformly bad, I guess I would say. And there were, no non-discrimination. One state that had non-discrimination protection, that was Minnesota, and felt maybe almost like accident, but probably say a little bit more about that too. And but for me, it really, engaged me in this work in a really serious way that has, become this incredible professional journey. But I partly marked that time because even though now we are facing this unbelievable backlash and, laws attacking transgender people and transgender young people and reversing protections that have really grown over the years, it's hard to mark like which is worse or bad, because it felt so impossible to even have like dignified conversations about transgender people's lives in the mid-1990s. And, there were cases that, you probably remember these details better than me, that compared, somebody that wanted to transition to a donkey that, wanted to be a different animal. I mean, that was, the level of analysis in cases. And so I try to bring that perspective to what we're facing, because of course, I mean, it's such incredibly challenging times at the moment, but I also feel like it's in part because of the foundational work that's been laid and the visibility around transgender people's lives and the support that people are beginning to find from families and progressive states, in Massachusetts, even in this last legislative session, passing a law to allow for really broad change in gender markers across documents and recognizing non-binary people. And, there's just a lot of progressive work that is happening at the same time. And I think that is a foundation for also what we're facing now. And so I'm going to then flip it to you, Shannon, to ask about like, what are those changes that you've seen? And I don't know if you want to give any more context to kind of, what things were like in the 1990s.
Yeah, no, I love hearing you talk about GLBTQ. That was so important for me, but more importantly for the beginning of like this. And that created a network of transgender advocates that persists to this day. Here we are, and the others too. And it was just so extraordinary. What it made me think of so many things, but one of the somewhat little bit humorous note was bittersweet. I remember when I got to that conference, I was like, I have never in my life seen a conference this well organized. Yeah. I mean, what in the world? I mean, like every detail and the woman who organized it, Phyllis Fry, who became the first openly transgender judge in the country in Texas. Okay, that happened in Texas. She was just such a visionary. I want to say more about that in a minute. But I remember saying that to Phyllis and saying, gosh, like, this conference is so well organized. She's like, yes, because Dee, this woman who's organized, was a engineer at NASA. I mean, it was like, it was about all these transgender women who had been like incredibly accomplished and got fired. Like, they didn't have jobs. I mean, so, I mean, it was really, I mean, boy, that was quite an experience in every way, but, yeah, and just to say a little more, yes, at that time, I mean, the thing, it was so exhilarating to be part of this whole, that movement, and, there was one state in Minnesota, which I think had done it accidentally, sort of had accidentally kind of passed a law that included transgender people, but besides that, like, we were just, for a decade, we were thrilled, we were counting local ordinances. We were just all over the country, transgender people were organizing to get local anti-discrimination laws, and we were thrilled to get those. And, you know, there's a whole network of people at the local level comparing notes, and, oh, how do you say this argument, that argument, what's the best language to use, and all that was really something. But the couple other thoughts about that is that, I remember going to the conference, oh, and Phyllis would get, so there'd be these panels, like these amazing people, truly amazing. I mean, it was so diverse. Do you remember that? It was like geographically diverse, racially diverse. You know, trans men, which Phyllis went out of her way to include transgender men, which at the time was like nobody even knew there were transgender men barely. Anyway, it was really something. But and people who were allies there who were like really experts in different areas of law. And Phyllis had court reporters. This was before like the days of recording things in Zoom. And so all the transcripts from all those proceedings were recorded. They're now available in an archive at Texas A&M University, which Ricardo knows that's quite saying something. That is one of the most conservative universities in the country, and that Phyllis made that happen because that's where she went to school. But I remember hearing arguments for the first time way back in the 90s, 1990s, at this conference that were later adopted by the U.S. Supreme Court in Bostock. The argument for why discrimination to the person transgender being sex discrimination. And, you know, it's really something to see that seed grow into a body of case law, which Jennifer had a lot to do with. First case in the country getting a federal court to hold that discrimination against a transgender person is sex discrimination under federal sex discrimination law. Anyway, that was something to be part of. But the other thing that's just hitting me, thinking back to that, is I don't know where Phyllis got the courage to do what she did or the vision to do what she did, but we need to remember that. Like, at the time when we had nothing, and transgender people were so stigmatized and just scorned and viewed with disgust, and you know, Phyllis herself went through hell. Like, she had crosses burned on her lawn. She was targeted by terrible hate groups in Texas. But she put forward this vision that we were part of the national fabric, that we deserve equality and dignity. She did this transgender international bill.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, this document that has lived on in broad, visionary expression of transgender people being entitled to full protection and equality. And she was constantly pushing us all to just live up to that. I mean, I had so many conversations with hospitals. We can't ask for this. We can't do that. She would be like, "What is wrong with you?" Yes, we can. Like, go do that. You know, like I was afraid for us to push for inclusion in what was then the National Lesbian Gay Bar Association, I think. And Phyllis was just relentless, like, no, they've got to change and take us in. And I was like, I don't know, maybe that's too much to ask. And, you know, anyway, I have a feeling, well, we just, you know, we're in a moment now where we need to remember that and hang on to her broad, courageous vision. But yeah, everything's changed for the better since then.
So we have, I have index cards that say, an aspirational 5 minutes per question, which I don't think is gonna happen, but
that one?
we're gonna pivot, because you said a lot, it's all really good stuff, and you've actually answered question number 2. So we're gonna move on. No, you're good. We're having a conversation. The other thing I'm gonna say is that one of the things that most folks, the reaction I get most commonly when I tell people that I lived in Texas for a while and I did LGBTQ rights mostly. But what people forget is that there are thousands of people who are fighting incredibly hard to ensure that the worst case scenario doesn't happen in Texas. In that spirit, Phyllis's legacy does live in all of the advocates that show up countless times to defend against real stackable odds that feel very heavy when you're in it. And so it's inspiring when you're close, right, from up close, and you get to experience it. So I don't know if it brings you any comfort to know that people in Lubbock, people in Houston, people in Brownsville, El Paso, they're all fighting, and it's inspiring. What do you think has contributed to the advances, not necessarily just in law, but also in terms of people's understandings about who trans people are over the course of the last 20 so years?
You take that first.
Oh, okay. So I want to hear what you think about that. Too,
Yeah,
from being
yeah.
from being in Texas. I do think a lot of it has been, we're transgender people, with lesbian, gay, bisexual people, the big change was people being able to come out. And then, there's this kind of I don't know, dialectical relationship because of, one of the major ways people are oppressed in our community is just being silenced and forced to be closeted and hidden. And then when we get a little bit of anti-discrimination protection, people can be more open, and then other people see, oh, actually, you're my coworker, you're my neighbor, or you're my family member. And then it just gets this, sort of escalating openness, and it breaks through people's stereotypes and misconceptions. I feel like one of the problems we have with transgender people is there's such a small group of, there's so few transgender people. And there's research now, I think the latest surveys and stuff show that, what is it, 79% of people in the country have never met, to their knowledge, a transgender person. That is a really big problem for us. So I think one of the main things that's been helpful is, paradoxically, really, every time transgender people are attacked and put into the forefront of national consciousness, in a way, it's horrible. But in another way, it's a gift and an opportunity to get people to be like, oh, there's transgender people. What do I think about that? And I don't know. I mean, I feel like that we tried to make the most of that with the transgender military ban.
Yeah, I mean, kind of linking back to the first question, I think one of the really pivotal moments and pivotal cases around transgender advocacy was the challenge to Trump's announcement of a ban on military service for transgender people. And, like so many things, he said it was going to happen and it was coming. And it was just, a few months into his administration in 2017 that he issued a tweet that said transgender people can't serve in the military. And I'm so proud of the work that we did. And, Shannon and I both look back to the summer of 2017, and I still really can't believe what we were able to put together in an incredibly short period of time to challenge that ban, including affidavits from each of the secretaries of the branches of the military, who were people who taught me for sure about military service and how that ban was going to undermine the stability of the country and how it interfered with military service. But the reason it felt like such an important case at the time was because of the opportunity it gave us to really shift the narrative from one which was really focused on the hardships and the challenges and the barriers and the fragility of transgender people to a narrative of strength and courage and service and contributions. And the fact that we had transgender people who had been putting their lives on the line, some of them for decade plus because of their service in the military, to say all we want is continued ability to serve our country, I think really gave us the chance, and I think it was incredibly successful to shift the narrative to one of the ways in which our country is worse off an understanding of transgender people's lives, and that picture that could be held up for transgender young people and adults, you know, about the possibility of their future. And I think that's, you know, that's what is so excruciating about this moment that we're in which young people are facing laws that exclude them from school programs, from facilities, from organizations, from community events, from access to healthcare that's life sustaining. And I despair of what that means in terms of young people, transgender people's vision of the possibility for their futures, and that's why the work is like so critical and so essential. But I think, kind of circling back, it is the possibility of seeing yourself in whole, you know, a lot of different contexts that I think has really dramatically shifted the possibility and the opportunity, but then also I think has fueled the reactionary, you know, hostility that we've been facing as well.
I just gotta give Amanda a shout out here because,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, that was like, there was the litigation part, and then every bit just as important was the public education part, and Amanda was so great about helping us stay on course. Just to echo what Jennifer said, we were like so clear, we're like, we are not going to make this be about harm to transgender people, or this is bad for transgender people, because frankly, people don't care. We're gonna make this be about, this is bad for our military, it's bad for our national security, this is bad for the like common good. And it was so, it really worked, y'all. Oh my gosh, we got all the press picked up those messages and put out stories about these remarkable people that were making incredible contributions to our nation. I mean, really, I'm so proud. I was so proud. I was like, I'm really proud to be transgender right now. Look at these amazing people. Like anybody would be proud to have these people in the military, which is so good. And I wonder if you think, and well, I know what you think too, Ricardo, like, I think we have that moment now. Maybe, maybe we're not doing enough on it, with the parents. Like, yes, there's all these states banning healthcare, but like these parents are standing up for their kids, and we are trying to put that message out there.
Yeah.
Because I think people don't think about that. They don't think of transgender people, if at all, as like weird, isolated, nobody likes them, they don't have family support, and that instead all these like, you know, just very ordinary people who happen to have transgender kids and are speaking up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there's probably more to take from those experiences going forward. Like, there's more to do even than we have, and I think we can be more disciplined and more careful in terms of figuring out the ways to pull out those themes and those messages around the ways in which our communities are harmed, our families are harmed, our workplaces are harmed by the barriers that we put in people's places, and not so much have the focus be on the fragility of the community. I don't know, what do you think of, what do you see in Texas around that, especially, I mean, around the DCF investigations and the families' responses to some of that in Texas?
It's hard to distill, right? I think the immediate thought that comes to me is that we have been fighting this for a very long time in Texas, specifically around the bathroom bill in 2013, 2015, 2017, the failed attempt at passing that bill. And people weren't waking up, and it didn't feel like folks were understanding the urgency, not even within folks that were on our side. And something happened in 2021, leading to 2022, when the governor and the attorney general were cahoots, decided to dictate or direct the Department of Family and Protective Services to investigate loving parents of transgender young people as child abusers. And something happened that was so visceral and so offensive to just Americans, where we saw the outrage for the first time. And that moment has been replicated again, where I think people have a higher tolerance for these attacks, right? And so they have been conditioned to expect this to be common, and folks forget that we as individuals have an opportunity and power to dictate what is permissible in terms of how we treat each other, right? So I think it's critical for folks to just meet transgender people, right? For stories about the lives of transgender people to be shared with the world, right? Because I think there is this viewpoint that trans stories are anchored in despair, and that's not true, right? Our lives are anchored in tremendous joy, and we show up to fight because we're forced to. And I think that universal empathy and compassion, I think, still lives within the human spirit, even if people are jaded. And that often helps, right? I remember a time when I went to the state legislature in Texas, and a family came with me, and a transgender girl who was trying to play sports with her friends in Houston ended up meeting one of our Republican House representatives, House reps, and he didn't say very much during the meeting. And she followed up and wrote him a letter, like a handwritten letter to the 7-year-old at the time. And he carried that letter in his pocket for the entirety of that legislative session because he was so moved. And I think she challenged his belief system in a very visceral way that he couldn't look away anymore. And he couldn't pretend that he wasn't part of this thing that was making her life more difficult. And that changed him in some regard. And he still didn't have the uncommon courage that we needed in that moment to defeat that bill ultimately. But something changed about him, and he was more willing to work with us because he met a human being that he couldn't deny was a happy, joyful, well-adjusted 7-year-old who just wanted to play with her friends and just happened to suck in sports, right? At the same time. So I think that is important. So the more that we can do about that, the better. There have been some campaigns that have worked in Texas around uplifting those stories, having validators like family members and physicians that are also featured within the video. They happen to be compelling, but to your point, they push away from the narrative that is to the reality of who we actually are.
I mean, I remember we have a challenge led into our in Alabama to their ban, and we had a pretty extensive hearing to get a preliminary injunction, which was subsequently reversed by the 11th Circuit. But we have very experienced local trial counsel there. We did all the things, become expert witnesses and all that, and we have great witnesses, and the state had the world's work. I mean, the most terrible experts ever. Even really conservative judges, who's kind of like, this is what you get, this is what you got, like, really? But, our trial counsel said that they thought the thing that really just sealed it for our judge was hearing from one of our parents.
Yeah.
And parents are really good.
Yeah.
Folks.
But I was gonna say, and we were working also in a case in Florida, and I think, Chris, it was the witness you may have put on at the preliminary injunction, which is mom of a transgender young person who was just so compelling, both in terms of the clear love and support that she had for her child, and also the offense of the state stepping in the way of her getting the medical care that her kid needed to thrive in. Similarly, I thought that was like a moment where you could just see the judge understanding the issue in a visceral way that, the judges needed all the other expert testimony as well, but that was just like a really big emotional shift in the courtroom.
So we move beyond question 3 and into I know we're on track. You just don't know about it yet. We've spoken about a couple of legal challenges. Obviously, are there more that you want to highlight or uplift that can give folks kind of an overview of where we stand in terms of pending litigation?
Well, I mean, again, listening to my colleagues, Ben and Chris, we are glad it's challenging. Did I miss someone, John? Oh, Skrmetti? Oh, yeah, we'll talk about Skrmetti. It's a pretty far case, but yeah. Oh, that. But before we get to that, there's New Hampshire passed 3 anti-trans laws this last legislative session, which devastating, and, you know, despite unbelievably, you know, deep work by GLAD and our partners, that's the direction that we've seen political shift. And, you know, one of the laws bans transgender young people from playing sports. So we brought, you know, important challenge to that law that's really building on work that you all did for sure, and are continuing to do in Utah, Arizona, which also builds on work that our partner organizations have done in Idaho and West Virginia, and other places. And Ben recounted the story today. We went in for a TRO, temporary restraining order, at 2 o'clock, so that our client could go to soccer practice at 6 o'clock at the beginning of the school year. And she was sitting in, you know, at least the row behind me in the courtroom. And like, if I can convey to you the power of a decision, well, first of all, that you have to go to court for, you know, how old is she? 15?
Yeah.
Yeah, for a 15-year-old to get to go to soccer practice, you sit in a courtroom to wait for a court to rule whether or not she can go to soccer practice that day. I mean, the weight of that is just beyond anything that anybody should have to endure. But at the same time, to see the joy on her face and her family's face when the court ruled from the bench that she got to go to soccer practice, you know, was really dramatic and transformative. And so, you know, that case is important. And let's talk about Skrmetti a little bit, John. You want to tee up at least that, what's happening at the Supreme Court coming up very soon?
Yeah. So the Supreme Court is hearing a case about a challenge to one of the laws banning medical care for transgender young people. This whole thing is played out in such a, I don't know, extraordinary, interesting kind of way, because I remember, gosh, what was that first one? Was it 2020 in Arkansas?
I think so.
Yeah. Was it also the same year Alabama? Or was it the next?
I think it was the prior year and then Alabama, the next session.
Anyway,
Might have been 2019 and then 2020.
things changed so quickly because we really hoped back then that it wouldn't spread. I mean, it was these laws, I mean, it was just out of the blue, it was so extraordinary, so extreme, unthinkable. We're just like, okay, we just gotta stop this, and surely this isn't gonna spread. Well, I mean, now half the country has passed these laws, and GLAD and CLR, other groups jumped in with challenging them everywhere we can. I mean, the extraordinary thing is, out of the first 10 federal court challenges, we'll win 9 of them in front of, like, including, like, some of the most conservative judges in the country. And that's how strong the evidence is on our side and how completely non-existent it is on the other side. Even the one that we lost, that was Oklahoma, the court didn't consider the evidence there. They just said, by that time there had been some reversals by appellate courts. Because what's happening is the district courts hear the evidence, they hear the parents, they hear the doctors, etc. They hear how the states have nothing, the red states have nothing to back up these outlandish claims they're making, and then they rule in our favor. Then it goes up to the appellate courts. They're not hearing from anybody, it's all on paper. They're not even really looking at the evidence presented at all. They're just saying, these laws don't discriminate. So they're subject only to, like, the most de minimis judicial review. And so that 10th court, those on the court rely on those appellate court decisions. Like, I don't even need to look at this evidence. You know, the state doesn't have to have, they have to have this embarrassed idea of a reason, and that's good enough. But I mean, that's how strong this all is on our side of the fence, where the courts are looking at the evidence. Anyhow, one of those bad appellate decisions has now gone up to the Supreme Court. There was a challenge to Kentucky's law, a challenge to Tennessee's law banning medical care. We got PIs in both those cases. Went up to the Sixth Circuit in a consolidated appeal, and the Sixth Circuit was like, no, there's no discrimination here. So this is subject only to rational basis review, and it's, you know, just kind of rubber stamped it. And the Supreme Court has agreed to hear the state challenge. The United States intervened in the Tennessee case, which I think is why the court took that one, and the Solicitor General filed their petition, and the court accepted it, and that's all very good for us. You know, that's, I think, yeah, it's great to have the United States, being the one to stand up and tell the court, hey, this is unconstitutional. Yeah, and it's interesting that our Solicitor General, Elizabeth Trailgar, we could not have a better advocate arguing for us. Not only is she just like the most brilliant oral arguer I've ever heard, period, she is deeply familiar with these issues because before she became Solicitor General, she was just getting involved in these cases pro bono. She argued the first challenge to a sports ban in Idaho.
Yeah.
Even before she was Solicitor General.
At a private law firm, yeah.
She was our co-counsel in I think it's the first, no, I don't know. But anyway, she was our co-counsel in a challenge to Idaho refusing to provide medical care to a transgender prisoner. I mean, she just really knows this area of law.
The thing I was gonna add, and I know lots of people may be familiar with the Skrmetti case, not everybody does, but the argument that's being made is that if you single out transgender young people and deny them medical treatment because they are transgender, that heightened scrutiny applies because it's discrimination on the basis of transgender status and therefore on the basis of sex. And it's a pretty middle of the road argument that rests on well-established Supreme Court precedent in the Bostock case, in which the court said that discrimination on the basis of transgender status and sexual orientation is sex discrimination. So it's like fastball down the middle in terms of the legal argument. And I mean, I'm hopeful, somebody asked the other day, well, how are you going to count 5 votes? And I thought, well, it's not hard in this case to count 5 votes. You've got, 3 progressive, supportive justices. You have Justice Gorsuch that wrote the Bostock opinion, and you have Justice Roberts, who seems unlikely to depart from well-established precedent. Now, I'm not, I don't know how that goes because we're just in unpredictable legal times, but if you were going to apply well-established legal principles, this should not be a hard case.
It shouldn't be, yeah. I think we have a real chance because of what Jennifer just explained. The issue from the court is a very narrow one. All they need to decide is, do these laws facially discriminate against transgender youth? They don't have to decide whether the medical care is legitimate or valid. They don't have to know anything about the medical care. It's a very discrete, focused legal issue that they have already decided in Bostock. So if they follow their own precedent, we shouldn't have a chance.
Argument is December 4th.
Yeah.
Expect a decision by the end of June. Some people think it comes as early as March, who knows.
Yeah, because the medications, these laws, they literally ban certain medications, not for all minors, but only when they're prescribed for a transgender minor. And the discrimination seems very clear.
And the laws specifically say that they are precluded from use when they're used for the purpose, effectively, of gender transition. So it's, how the court's going to get around what seems like an unbelievably straightforward argument, I don't know. So in that case, I'll remain hopeful.
I would like to congratulate you for answering question 4.
Awesome.
Very good job. Thank you, John, for answering my question. Question 7. I know the election is on everyone's mind, and this will be the last question before we open it up to folks who may be dying to ask another question. Can you talk a little bit about what you think is at stake in this election for transgender people and what people should prepare for, regardless of the outcome of the election?
I'll answer the first part. So I'll share. Have been traveling. I was away for the last 3 weeks in Nepal and India, and it was really interesting to be among mostly non-U.S. citizens, and noting that all eyes are on this country's election. I'm hiking, that was my goal. And people say like, are you gonna be back by November 5th or whatever? And first I'm like, wait, what's that date? What's happening? But you know, all eyes are on what's gonna happen. And you know, the reason I wanted to answer the first part of the question is I just think everything's at stake. I mean, rule of law, climate, immigration, safety, you know, just all of the issues that affect everybody's life is what's at stake. And of course, that means that transgender people's lives are at risk and at stake, and queer people's lives are as well. But I do think it's so important for all of us to, you know, kind of have that perspective of what the stakes are. And, you know, just again, to kind of bring this international perspective, it's so clear, because people share that, you know, other countries are, political regimes are shifting in relationship to what we are seeing in terms of shifts in this country, and you know, the dialogue and what's fair game even to say, just kind of harking back what Shannon was saying, which is true. You know, we thought we could continue to fight off these unbelievably reactionary laws, and when the first one was passed, it was so surprising, and we still thought we could fight off the next laws, and they got worse. You know, first it was like professional degrees at stake, and then professional licensure at stake, and then it was criminalization, and then it was felony, then it was like, you know, competing civil claims for damages for provision of care. I mean, it's just, there is no bottom. And so, yeah, I just think all of that is at stake for sure in this upcoming election. And then, you know, I will just say though, for me, it's not like all, like, however it goes, the work will continue. And honestly, however the election comes out, I mean, the lesson for me around the last outcome, which was an incoming Biden administration, which seemed to have resulted in unbelievable polarization and the most reactionary laws passed in conservative states, is the lesson of we've got to just continue the work, deepen the work, be ready for anything, continue to mobilize, expand the mobilization. Everybody can do what they can do to contribute. And when I say, which I do totally think, like everything's at stake, climate, immigration, safety, economics, you know, racial justice, everything is always at stake. And I can do what I can do, which means supporting all of that work and dig into, continue to do the transgender and queer advocacy that's going to be essential at every level. And we've got to learn both from our mistakes and from our successes. And I'll just say one more thing. I think we also continue to do the positive work in the states where we can do it. We have to do it in a thoughtful, careful way, as I said. I mean, I think it's amazing this last legislative session in Massachusetts to see some really dramatic, important policy changes going forward, and we have support, you know, from legislators and from communities that are ready to, when they can, make positive change. And I think we have to do it in careful ways, because that does also deepen the reactionary responses and all of those pieces as well. So it's like everything, everybody, everywhere, all at once. So I don't know. That's what I think. What do you think?
Oh my gosh, yeah, no,
Ricardo,
yeah, that was great. Yeah, well, I listened to the team a little bit. I think so great, Ricardo, you're new leader. We're glad, because just because of what you just said. I mean, you know, we really now have to get very serious about coordinating blue state, red state policy work and messaging and all that. It's absolutely essential. I mean, I live in Texas now, Carter Western's there. It's really scary to be living in a red state right now as an LGBTQ person, and especially honestly as a transgender person. We do need to be smart about all this. I mean, it's depending on how the election goes, we could face really terrible setbacks. I mean, I've been into our challenge, the first state laws restricting healthcare for adults in Florida. So far, Florida is the only state to do that, but I fear for the future, particularly depending on what happens in the election. It's going to be potentially a very rough time. Yeah, I mean, that's why I was hearkening back to Phyllis, even in my own mind. I mean, that was a rough time too. When Phyllis we're all starting all this, and, you know, I mean, we can weather it, but it does require a lot of, different orientation than we've had, I think. Yeah,
Discipline, commitment.
yeah, more just,
Expansion of border.
right, I know what else I want to say, yeah, and no matter, I think it seems like whatever happens, it seems like it's gonna be close. And we just have to get more serious about reaching people where they are, and not just talking to ourselves, not just having messaging that sounds good to us, but we've got to bring people along with us. I mean, we really have to do that, yeah,
What do you think, Ricardo?
yeah.
Well, you know that I'm an optimist, so I think there's a tremendous amount of promise, regardless of the outcome, right? I work in Texas where we don't necessarily have any institutional power, and I've repeated this so many times. We don't have a House majority, we don't have the Senate, we don't have a supportive Speaker of the House, we don't have a Lieutenant Governor that is supportive, or a governor, or any of the state agencies. There really is no institutional power in Texas, and yet Texas defeated 96% of the 143 bills that were filed last year in the state, and that shouldn't have happened. So miraculous things can happen when people do their part, right? And I think that I rest in the hope that I believe in the people, and we have a tremendous amount of power if you can compound it, and people are doing their small part in small and large ways every single day. So I try to anchor myself in that and take it a day at a time, obviously plan for the worst case scenario. And if we're there, then just hustle and work incredibly hard to make the lives of LGBTQ people much better.